So before we get started, could you all introduce yourselves by name and title on the show for our listeners out there?
I'm Alvaro Rodriguez. I'm the co-creator and executive producer of Seis Manos.
I'm Brad Graeber. I'm the co-creator and executive producer of Seis Manos.
I'm Daniel Dominguez. I'm a co-EP and writer on Seis Manos.
Oh, we're talking Seis Manos today? I just want to make sure we got that right. We're all here for the right show? Okay, cool.
I mean, whatever you want to talk about, Dave. I'm cool. I got time, baby.
Thank you so much. And also, to start off, I wanted to do kind of a wellness check just to make sure everybody's doing okay and ask how you all are doing during the ongoing kind of quarantine and pandemic that we're all dealing with.
I mean, I'm pretty relaxed, and the work is steady. It's been interesting working in my pajamas as opposed to in an office, but thankfully everyone, I haven't really been touched by it. Everyone that I know is safe and well and healthy. The only real effect that it has had on my life is that we got a Peloton. So that's about it.
I'm doing good too. Although I can confirm that Daniel often came to work in his pajamas. They were Cookie Monster pajamas.
That's true.
So I don't think that there's been that much of a transition for him.
That's probably
but no, I mean, I feel like things are difficult. They're likely to stay that way for a while, but we're hopeful, and I think one of the spaces where things have been moving on without as much static as other places has been in animation.
Yep.
So we're very hopeful that that bodes well for Seis Manos and other projects.
Yeah. I mean, at the studio, we've been work from home for about 2 months or so now, but, it's got, it definitely has challenges and things are difficult, but at the end of the day, we're very lucky and privileged that we're all still working, and most of our deadlines haven't shifted, and people are looking to do more animation, so it has been not as hard on us as it has been on others.
Yeah, over the last 6 or 8 weeks or so, most of the folks I get to talk to are in the animation industry. So whether they're creators, voice actors, I've heard a lot of stories about how animation isn't just negatively impacted the way live action productions might be, but they've actually seen an uptick in a lot of work. So can you guys comment on how some of the industry things have maybe changed for you, if at all?
Sure. I mean, at the end of the day, there are definitely a lot more calls coming in for people trying to figure out how to do things in animation. We probably get 10 to 15 people contacting Powerhouse about music videos almost daily, just because, there's not a way to do them in live action currently. So it definitely has garnered a lot more interest, and, there are artists who, it doesn't change an animator's day all that much. They're sitting in front of their Cintiq and drawing and conversating via IM most of the time. So, there actually might be a little bit of a productivity bump for the artists right now because they're not getting interrupted by stupid meetings all the time. But that being said, it's producers are having to work double time trying to keep everybody, on task and, calling around and checking in on things and managing systems where people are not all in the same space. All of that being said, yeah, there definitely seems to be new interest in doing more animated projects right now. So.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I was pretty busy before, and I'm pretty busy still. But it's definitely, I don't know. The uptick is certainly correct. I remember one of my favorite things when I got into therapy was learning how to say no, and now I take incredible pleasure in it. So it is fun getting to say no more.
And then with all of the kind of difficulties that come with this too, there are some silver linings. It's been interesting to watch how animation companies or just content companies in general have found ways to reach out to people. And one way that you have done that with Seis Manos is you've been running these Saturday watch parties. So how's that experience been? How did that come up? And what's that been like for you as the creative force behind this series?
Well, it came up because some of our folks at the studio, and I think Daniel saw they were doing one for Kipo, and we talked about it, and we're talking about it at the same time internally, trying to figure out how to do some of these watch parties to just engage the audience a little bit more. Plus, Saturday morning cartoons was just a fun little idea to kind of frame it on.
Yeah.
But honestly, from a selfish standpoint, I miss Daniel and Alvaro very, very much, and I miss working on the series, and most of the work that I've been doing while we're having this uptick that we've been talking about has been not necessarily on the creative side. And so whether it was intentional or not, it's been a wonderful thing to re-engage with the guys and see people react to things, and just feel the love for the show, and listening to all these fan theories and things like that has just been an uplifting experience for me, because it's getting outside of emails and spreadsheets and remembering why we do what we do at Powerhouse. Plus, I've just been stuck in an office, and I don't know how Alvaro and Daniel feel, but like even just seeing them each tweet about stuff and tell jokes or send a meme or something like that, it's very reminiscent of the process that we had working on the show. So it's been very uplifting for me.
Me too. There's a strange experience that comes from, having a project that, like most animated things, takes a year to animate. Takes, so much time between the time that it's written, the time that it's recorded, the time that it's, animated, and then the time that it's released. And you go through this sort of surreal experience, like we went to San Diego Comic-Con, went to New York Comic-Con, but this, once it drops, it's dropped. And so there's very little sort of like continuity that you would have with a show that's like, well, there's an episode coming out every week and you get to build your audience. It just like drops. And so we have, we've been trying to find ways in which to engage an audience. One of the great things about social media is that, you get to see these sort of tendrils unfold and unfurl out globally, people tweeting about it in Europe or in South America, months and months after the thing has been released. So, this kind of a thing with our Saturday morning cartoon, which is obviously ironic in the first place because it's an adult sort of animated cartoon.
Right.
But, this sort of experience just engages us as creators, engages us as, people involved in the process. And it's really great experience to see that again and see how this thing, sort of has legs and reaches audiences.
I mean, I remember all of us going back and forth, even before we got in the room, just putting so much, more than I ever had, certainly, I think, into anything, into even just developing it and fleshing it out and all of that stuff. And I don't remember the specific day, but I remember Alvaro and I talking about just like, because I grew up on anime, I grew up on like adult cartoons that I fell in love with. I was just surprised by just the level of like philosophical complexity you could do in the storytelling of that stuff. And I remember thinking like, as we were, and this was part of the project all along, but like just the realization like of what it would be like to have someone who has been a fanboy or girl like I was when I was younger of this stuff, like see this and see them and finally see themselves represented in the show in a way that I don't think has ever been done before. Like there hasn't been like a Latinx, show in this space, and like what that would mean. And then we went to Comic-Con and we would see these people get in line and like be like crying and like telling us like I got to see myself up there. Like I don't know, that was such a visceral and wonderful like confirmation of like why this kind of thing matters. And then I don't know, the fun has been wonderful getting back and playing with these guys, but like also just seeing all the people online have that same reaction, seeing all that same stuff on Twitter. Like, I don't even speak Spanish, and I just see all these Spanish tweets going back and forth about it, and it just sort of like, I don't know. I feel like the Grinch with his heart growing 10 sizes bigger in those moments.
Speaking of the experiences that you have on social media while you're doing these watch parties, have you guys noticed more new fans coming to the series for the first time and like discovering it for the first time? Or do you see a lot of folks who had watched it at launch had watched it since then and are now coming back to kind of soak up more behind the scenes information that you guys are sharing out?
I'd say a little bit of both. I mean, there are some like really wonderful fans who have written great pieces and have, commented on things that Alvaro has put out, or, others have put out, or Powerhouse has put out. So there's definitely a nice little core group of fans that are participating. But some of the best things is seeing their fan bases reacting to them talking about it, and then introducing them to the show and getting new people involved. They're definitely, it definitely helps when you have a show with, Angelica Valle or, Danny Trejo involved, and, their social media reach is so large. And so there are a lot of new people coming in as we're talking about the work that they did on the show too.
Yeah, and I wanted to talk a little bit about the representation, Daniel, that you mentioned earlier, too, because this show is fantastic for kind of, and I don't want to belittle it, but sort of checking those boxes that a lot of productions are very keen on today. A lot of new productions are very tuned in to social commentary, to diversity on the screen or on the page, as it might be. So what I love about Seis Manos is you do kind of, you take those pains to make sure that folks who normally aren't represented get a chance to shine here. So what was kind of that maybe creation process going back a few years now about why it was important to focus on the particular characters that you do?
That's a lot of years.
Well, one of the things I think that is really important in that regard is that there were never boxes to tick in Seis Manos. Seis Manos was about just telling a story, and this is just the world in which it happened to be set. So there was never any sort of agenda. Well, let's have this, this Latinx character, this African American character, this Asian American character, or any of that kind of stuff. There was no sort of formula to it. It was just about these are the characters in this world, and it was just kind of a little bit of a, I don't know, complete surprise, but it was certainly surprising. It's like, in talking to one of the voice actors who I had met before, and I said, this actor, Roger Craig Smith, who was the voice of Batman and Batman Ninja and so many other things, and he plays Larry, the CIA operative, and or the DA or whatever he is, and the government agent. And I was like, you're basically the only white guy in the show. And, but it wasn't, it wasn't even that it was like, there was no intention behind it other than, this was our show. So in a way that was so much more liberating because we weren't keeping a tally of boxes to check off. In terms of representation.
Even before, it's, I don't know how many years, when Alvaro and I first met, which at this point, I don't know, how long have we been friends? 6 years, something like that?
I think it's going on 7 years.
7 years, this project predated that.
Oh, wow.
I remember, as we were getting to know each other very early on, him telling me about this, and I knew all these people in the animation space because I'd been writing in that space for a long time, and me and Graeber have this really dope thing, and so they had this sort of prior to that, and already 7 years ago, this is before the wave of Hollywood catching up to the reality of the world or whatever, and at that time, even just hearing about it from him in the nascent stage that it was in, it was just well, this is just awesome because these are the things that excite us to write about it and that we care about because they're really fun to write about. They're interesting and their stories worth telling, and it's as simple as that. And so I think, thank God Hollywood is sort of caught up to the reality of the world we live in all these sorts of ways like that, both from the diversity perspective, but also from the sociological, political perspective, et cetera. But at that time, we were all just I remember us running around preaching the gospel, everyone going I swear to God, this is awesome, and people want it. And them going I don't know, man. And then, the reality caught up with the show.
Yeah, Al and I went around and pitched it many, many places for a couple of years before, it really got around to, getting picked up. But when it did, it kind of went really, really fast too. So at the end of the day, it's, like Al says, an intention to check the box or to do something specifically. It just was one of those things where we wanted to make a badass show. We were both from Texas. It was kind of the natural story that mixed all the stuff that we loved, the Grindhouse, the Kung Fu shows, all of that other things, and it just happened to be that. And then, we found two, wonderful writers to work with, and it became what it was. There was never like a formulaic plan to it at all.
Well, I know for me personally, the first time I got a chance to see any of it or be introduced to any of it was 2017, back at the Rooster Teeth Animation Festival, where I forget who was there, but you presented a kind of sizzle reel of a fight sequence that was more or less done. And me and the whole room, I was just kind of like, jaw was on the floor, like, I need to see more of this, yeah.
Yeah, what's funny about it is, like, everything, of course, is interlocked, and there's not a clear-cut story on all of it, but I think if I remember correctly, Fred Seibert and I were on a panel talking about animation, and it was when we had started Castlevania. That being said, Seis Manos was a fight choreography test that we did with Sam Dietz in the studio to try to go out and sell the show. And this was before Sam was working on Castlevania. And then he had done a whole bunch of really cool Naruto fan art fight sequences, and then we had the Seis Manos piece, and that's what we used to go sell Powerhouse to be the studio that worked on Castlevania.
Oh, wow.
So, like, Castlevania and Seis Manos are actually tied into, which came first, chicken and the egg, and there's not really a clear-cut version of that, because without the Seis Manos test, I don't know that we would have gotten Castlevania. Without Castlevania, it would have been hard to go out and sell a show like Seis Manos, because people weren't doing things like that at the time.
Now you're going to see all these think pieces about how Castlevania and Seis Manos are in the same Powerhouse cinematic universe, so get ready for those fan theories if they're not out there already.
I confirm that is not true. Even though in Seis Manos there is an Easter egg where El Balde picks up a small little Alucard doll in the market. So, like, we try to drop things like that in the shows, but I think Warren Ellis would definitely squash any theories.
I think you made it officially canon accidentally there. And then, like, 20 years now, when Alvaro and I and you are all sellouts, we can be like, yeah, dog, every Powerhouse show happens in one universe, and also Jurassic Park, and yeah.
I don't think I have to wait 20 years to be a sellout. I think
Well, now I'm going to have to go back and watch that for like a fifth time now, because I think I missed the Alucard doll Easter egg, so I'll have to go back for that one.
I think it's coming up in the next episode.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
Buddy, I think it's even more salady, because I think it kind of looks like a PopCap doll, too. So, hint, from Brad.
So speaking of that, this weekend, you guys are continuing the series of the Saturday watch parties, and I believe it's episodes 5 and 6, so we've got Blindfold and Reunion coming up. Anything you would like to tease for our listeners out there who are looking forward to the watch party for these episodes?
Ooh. Definitely be a part of them. They are 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, adult Saturday morning cartoon. Get on Twitter, hashtag Seis Manos, as all one word, hashtag SEISMANOS. And join along with the fun. You can add us, and we'll respond to you unless we don't see it. We just make all sorts of silly jokes and tell stories from making the show and stuff like that. And I usually have no idea what I'm talking about and terrible doing homework, so I get real random. It's so much fun. Honestly, adult Saturday morning cartoon is just a great idea anyway, now that like adult dark cartoons can come out in the United States, thanks largely to Powerhouse. Thank you, Powerhouse. And like, that should be a thing anyway, honestly. I just imagine some like tired 41-year-old like mom and dad sitting there going like, I need a bloodbath just for some catharsis for 2 hours on Saturday morning.
Exactly.
It's a great time.
One thing that I'm going to do is I have some outtakes from the record sessions, which were a lot. That was one of the highlights of working on the show, was getting in there and watching the scripts come to life that these guys put together. So I've got some outtakes, I think, of Until I Get in Trouble. I'm going to put out some of the Danny Toho, like the Mike Coulter different takes, and even some stuff that was cut from the script. But 5 and 6 are kind of like, I don't know. When I tried to prepare all the things to tweet, and I am a type A who pre-wrote every single tweet for episodes 1 and 2 Saturday Morning Cartoon, and had a folder where I labeled all of the different photos to post with them. I had 50 something for episode 1 just because, there was so much that was packed into those episodes to explain, from the Kung Fu to the Mexican cinema to there's just so much. And I ended up only being able to put out half of the tweets that I had pre-written. It was just trying to quickly copy and paste a whole bunch of stuff so rapidly. 5 and 6 to me are similar in how much stuff is in them to episodes 1 and 2. We established the show, then we had fun in 3 and 4, and then 5 and 6 have just a lot of Easter eggs and things that they were based on. So there's just quite a lot of things that need to be acknowledged, because I don't know, I always have fun seeing things that even I didn't remember. For instance, Willis put out this one shot of how they took shot for shot the killing of the little girl at the ice cream truck from Assault on Precinct 13, and I had totally forgotten that it was shot for shot when they shot Piojo the first time. I was like, oh my god, yeah, that was in there. So I don't know, 5 and 6, there's just a lot to talk about in there, and I'm sure Al will have some great things to put out too.
Yeah, I like going back and looking at the script and taking some little screen grabs of the script page and even some notes, just because it's fun to kind of go back and look, and then also, just to sort of spill my cinema, fan guts about, oh, this was a reference to, this movie, or this was influenced by this movie, and just kind of lay it all bare on the table, open kimono, as we say.
I mean, stuff, especially in the editing and editing process, our first draft of the pilot was 34 pages or something like that. And there are so many little things in there. If we had an unlimited budget, it would have been amazing. There's a sequence where that monster guy just straight up murders a bunch of coyotes as he's running through the desert. We couldn't do. And I know there's a ton of that in every episode. It's just fun, but it's just at a certain point you have to sort of pace it out for time and stuff like that. There's nuggets all over. They're fun to throw back up.
Yeah, I was wondering what your guys' homework process was kind of like for having to research all that stuff, and how much you were just I've been waiting to let somebody know about this, or oh wow, I didn't remember that we were trying to do that kind of thing. So it's been fun to watch along and kind of unearth all that historical, almost archived trivia. It's been really cool. When you guys were actually, over the last decade or so kind of developing this, there is so much to pull from, and so many things, even as hyper-specific as that one scene from Assault on Precinct 13, or any of the kind of either blaxploitation roles, or the sort of 70s grindhouse cinema, or any of the Chinese martial arts movies, or any of that stuff. So how did you even begin to boil all that stuff down into what would become Seis Manos? How did you make those decisions?
It's a good question, and correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but I think probably the best way to answer that is we all came from a different space, but all worked really well together to kind of put in our specific loves and wants, and then boil that down and make something that was completely unique to it. So at the end of the day, I'm really interested in fight choreography and the old Shaw Brothers Kung Fu stuff, and I would always, there's lots of stuff like Daniel said that we didn't necessarily get to include in the series, but I would push for more of that stuff. Al has this amazing cinematic knowledge of all these 70s era grindhouse films, and we would share little clips from that. I would send a Taoist book to the guys. They would say I needed to watch this one blaxploitation film. Daniel would make reference to different anime things from the past, and it kind of created a new thing through those different interests, and us all kind of pushing and pulling on one another.
Yeah. I remember Alvaro put me through blaxploitation school as part of the homework that we were doing, which was awesome, by the way. Oh my God, it was phenomenal. I actually totally ripped off a line from a movie called Truck Turner, and threw it in there just because it's one of the best things I've ever heard a human being say in a movie, which is pretty. But it was such a wonderful Venn diagram, like I'm obsessed with like the CIA running roughshod over Central and South America. Mm-hmm. So like this was an opportunity to talk through some of that stuff in a fiction narrative and stuff like that. And, we were all fans of Grindhouse, but like Brad is like kung fu with a bullet, and Alvaro is basically a human Criterion collection. It's just a wonderful collection of people throwing the stuff they love together in a way that I think ended up feeling really organic.
Yeah, and it feels like that too from a viewer's perspective. It's just it's amazing how well it all works together, but it also feels like if they were making these kinds of anime series, in the 70s at this quality, it feels like a story that would have just come out of out of that era. Like it feels very much derived from it and of a piece. But whose decision was it, or whose idea was it, to put that kind of grainy, sort of burned and sometimes split filter over a lot of the animated scenes?
That was Willis Bulliner, the director, and Adam Conroe. And I think, we all talked about it, but the way that they did it, like, it's hard to imagine the show without that. So, like, but they did it in a really creative way. I mean, not only do the cigarette burns happen in the show when they should happen, mathematically, but they also kind of turn it up and turn it down depending upon, the darkness of the scene and what's going on in the scene. And so, I think that they really do it in a unique and creative way that's never been explored before.
Yeah, to have seen it not just applied, but to have been like utilized sort of thematically and tonally dependent on what is happening. Mm-hmm. I was so blown away by that choice. Yeah, it was incredible.
I think personally one of my favorite splits, maybe in an episode that hasn't come up in your watch party yet. I think it's the 7th one, maybe the 8th one, but it's right after a major reveal and right before the jump to like the intro title sequence. There's a great split, like the film runs out or the film breaks.
And then it jumps. Yeah. I love that. That was fantastic.
Yeah. So that's in 7. And what's funny about that is, animation is a very iterative process. Like Al said earlier, it's just such a long distance between scripts and records and all that other sort of stuff. And I was so worried about that when it wasn't until the sound got in there that I was like, oh, this will work. Because like when you see it in an animatic and there's not that, that rundown sound, you're like, this is gimmicky, this may not work, but Willis really stood behind it. And then when the guys at TVD Post, Brad Engelking, all those guys put the sounds in there, you're like, oh crap, yeah, that's perfect.
Now we've talked a lot about kind of where you all pulled from for inspiration, but you also have your own kind of unique and original mythology that, to be honest, is only kind of getting going here in season 1. Like, there's a lot of nuggets, there's a lot of breadcrumbs and teases. But maybe walk me through some of that, developing your own mythology for this original property.
Well, part of the thing that I was always fascinated by, in the telling of this story as it started to come together was, I love the mythology. I love all that stuff. So finding elements that, were basically based on like the cult of the Santa Muerte or something like that, but creating this Santa Nucifera. Nucifera is, like a Latin for one of the types of lotus. So, now we had this sort of like potential crossover between a Santa Muerte and, we're at one point calling the Lady of the Lotus. And but it was all, it was basically all invented. It wasn't based on anything except, sort of like putting our own spin on the mythology that already existed. We were obviously really interested also in, this sort of thing that happens with syncretism, where Catholicism, is sort of pasted over, the indigenous religions and all that kind of stuff. And so in building all of these things, it was kind of like this sort of mishmash of all these different cultures and all these different, schools of thought and the idea of the goddess and there were just, even in some Egyptian mythology kind of things with the sarcophagus but it all seemed plausible in this space, which I thought was really cool. Yeah.
And Al's invention of Sanctum Lucifera too, like the whole Lotus aspect of it melded so well. And then as part of our like big homework stuff we did, Brad had us read, the Tao, and go through a really great translation of it, and all that sort of stuff. And so, obviously there's, like you said, a bouillabaisse of like Chinese mythology. So the Lotus creation, the wonderful thing that Al came up with, melded so naturally with things related that we pulled from in the Chinese mythology space, and sort of what all of that sort of ended up doing, I think, in a really interesting way. I mean, you're not wrong, sir, in that we definitely quite intentionally built it as a breadcrumb trail. And partly pragmatic. I know when I came into the project, part of that was that Netflix was actually asking us to include in the sort of like sales pitch of it what a 3-season arc would look like.
Right.
And so we intentionally built a 3-season arc for the show, which required that in season 1 we do it in a way that it is setting up essentially act 1 of a 3-act tale. And so you're right. A lot of that is meant to pay off in future seasons.
Yeah, and a lot of it was like great research on the guy's part, and then also a lot of really cool synchronicity that happened. Like El Balde is a little based on Adolfo Constanzo, and the murders that happened in Matamoros in the 80s. And he had Magangas, which were these, buckets that they kind of did these rituals with. And then when we visited a curandero in Austin to learn more about the process and make sure everything in the background was correct and all that, he actually had one and talked about how you could use it to control the spirit of a witch or something like that. And then that was already in the script that Al had, but it was this wonderful kind of synchronicity that happened across the project. And they, like Al and Dan, did so much research and went, there's Dan on video is showing us one of his little Santa Muertes that he got from the curandera shop. We did everything from looking at voodoo books. I remember long conversations about that. Al and Dan went and visited a Taoist priest out there in Burbank and had conversations with him. I mean, there's definitely a unique universe that pulls a lot of different threads together. But there was a lot of time spent making sure that we got it as authentic as possible.
We're also big Joseph Campbell heads, a lot of us. So I'm always such a fan of like the myth and the idea of the, all myths are one myth and that kind of thing too. And just the way if you look at all mythology, religion, faith, all of this, you find so many just sort of like identical strands running through everyone's sort of like stories for how and why things are the way they are.
Well, I'm happy we get to add Seis Manos mythology to that list, and hopefully get to see more of that in the future. But as a quick aside, are you guys working with like Insight Editions, anybody on a behind-the-scenes book? Because I feel like there's such a wealth of information and inspiration and art that most people probably won't get to see, but would love to. Are you working on anything like that?
Not right now. I mean, we would love to. I mean, part of the hope of these Saturday morning cartoon watch parties and all of this is that, the audience continues to build and the interest happens, and, we kind of get those tendrils out into other parts of the social media world and more people are introduced to the show. But, right now, I think about a book like that all the time, and that's nothing more than to put together a book like that. And I'm sure Al and Dan feel the same way. But like right now, unfortunately.
Tell all your friends about us and tell them to tell their friends about us, and I'll give you all the merch you want.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of why we're here. My buddy and I have been running this particular podcast for years and years, but I'm happy and privileged and honored to be able to talk to folks like you who are bringing original productions into the world. Adaptations are great. Adaptations can bring, a nostalgic property into the contemporary times and really do something interesting with it. We've seen that a lot in recent years. But there are fewer and fewer, it feels like, original kind of projects. Now, this, I believe, was Powerhouse's first original series overall. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
So what's kind of the... I don't know what I want to say as far as like the outlook, but let's just get the elephant out of the room here. Season 2, what do we have to do as a community, as an industry? What do we have to do to move that needle so you guys can say, yeah, Season 2 is a go and we're working on it?
I have an idea that I don't think anyone will agree with, but I think my master plan continues to be get a really famous rapper to tweet about us a bunch. Because everyone who loves hip-hop loves Kung Fu, man. That's fucking fact. Because
I don't know. I desperately want to tell that we were lucky enough to where we were able to write season 2, and the scripts are so good.
It's so good.
They're so good. Al wrote a script that has this amazing metaphor to another famous kung fu movie that I want to make so bad.
I have no memory of any of it. I have no memory of any of it. No, I mean, we wrote a second season. You know, we had talked about our third season. We're guardedly optimistic, but part of, I guess, the idea is, we're going to hope that we can continue, spreading the word and building that audience and growing that audience, and and just trying to get exposure out there. And then I think that's that's always been the sort of the thing that stops things in their tracks is just like a lack of exposure. And I feel like, Seis Manos, for whatever reason, just sort of slipped through those cracks and didn't get the kind of exposure that an original IP needs to get in order for it to gain traction. And so that's why some of this social media stuff has been so valuable, in that it's it's continued to give some exposure to it. But we really are sort of we're sort of still waiting for our real breakout, and I'm not sure what's going to be the thing that changes that, but yeah, we loved the property. We loved the project, and we loved the stories that we were telling and the characters that we were building, and we'd love to be able to keep doing that.
I can tell you, I have not had more fun or been more proud of a season of television than I've been involved with a lot of wonderful things and continue to be, but that season 2 batch of Seis Manos, it pulls so much of the mythology together. It's I'm just going to say this. I'm just going to throw this out there as a lure for people. It's just somewhere in there is a baboon in a mech with a flamethrower. I'm not going to say why or how we got that in there.
You somehow hit all my specific things that I look for. Somehow.
It really is so good. But I do think. I do think the show will eventually find its audience. I mean, I'm hoping it's sooner rather than later. And again, the animation landscape is changing, and I do think there's a thread to hit with this series, and we're just trying to find out and do our best to make sure that we do hit that thread.
I will make you guys this deal. I will work on getting a world-famous rapper to get into Seis Manos, if they're not already, much like, the Wu-Tang Clan members have been for a very long time. If I can get, maybe some confirmation or a nod that a master of a flying guillotine maybe shows up in season 2 or 3.
I guarantee that.
Perfect. Deal done.
Yeah.
All kidding aside, Tuca and Birdie was very kind of socially aware and conscious, and it was out there in the zeitgeist, and then it was axed really before it could find its audience. But this week we saw that a season 2 was picked up by Adult Swim. So I feel like there are audiences and there are arenas for these types of shows. So I don't know if you guys can talk about it or not, but are you able to look outside of Netflix, or are you just currently waiting to see what your numbers are or what their decision ultimately is?
I'm just going to slowly turn and look at Brad for however he wants to talk about that question.
I mean, right now we're hoping that it finds an audience on Netflix, and that audience continues to grow. I mean, there's a time period where things can move to other places, but for what it's worth, Tuca and Birdie is a wonderful show, and I think, maybe on Cartoon Network it might be the right place for it. I still believe that that Seis Manos is a streaming show, and that, Netflix is the proper place for a show like that. But it's difficult to say what will happen long term, but I'm hoping that it finds an audience here on Netflix.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. I mean, we had great partners with Viz and Netflix. Yeah. When we first met with Netflix, with Viz, and Viz came on board, and then we went together to talk to Netflix. Netflix were so encouraging and so it was a very liberating thing. One of the things that they, that was said in that meeting has always stuck with me, which was, don't try to put something in here that's going to appeal to a particular demographic. And you got to find the thing that's going to make 13-year-old boys want to watch this, or 16-year-old girls, or people from this, whatever the demographics are. Just be as authentic to your story as possible, because the more authentic it is, the more universal it will be. And so, when you're getting that kind of advice, you're getting those kinds of guidelines, going into the process, you can't help but want to be in business with those kind of people. Yeah. And so, Netflix and Viz and Powerhouse and the sort of collaboration that we've all been a part of with our voice cast, it's like everyone feels really invested in the show and invested in the stories that we were telling. And that's something we want to try to keep going as much as possible.
Yeah, they're just absolutely on a creative level too. They're just so wonderful to play with, and just compassionate and smart, and supportive. Obviously, everyone has said, but it's a great space to play.
And I can second all that too. From all the folks I've talked to on Netflix productions, they seem fans and friends to genre. They are one of the platforms out there, maybe the top, who is willing to kind of push that envelope and allow a wider range of genre and perspective and all kinds of stuff. So pushing for season 2 on Netflix, let's hope. But as we kind of wrap up or start to wind down here today, I want to bring it back to kind of a character focus for a second. We mentioned earlier how great Seis Manos is at delivering characters, maybe underrepresented characters. I specifically love Silencio as a mute character, but also Lena as his partner, who is differently abled. I don't know if we ever get the background on her or not as to why she lost a hand, but I love the fact that they have this relationship, and you show it how they complement each other, especially in the guitar playing scene. Was Silencio and Lena, were they always part of the script early on?
Silencio was. Lena was not necessarily part of the script early on, but I think that backstory did get told in either 3 or 4, in a scene where they're, I guess it's after they've made the plan to leave, leave San Simon, and then Lena confesses her role in knowing about Father Serrano and knowing about Balde and all of this stuff. But no, I mean, again, the idea about representing differently abled characters, it wasn't I can't say it wasn't intentional, but it wasn't ticking off a box thing too. There was just something that was so natural to this idea of the way that those two characters find themselves, and it's something I've always been sort of fascinated by, but just the idea, like the guitar scene, mm-hmm. the Mal Hombre scene, is so iconic in that it represents how these two people complement each other, and how they could, together make something that didn't exist before. How the relationship itself is this sort of new thing. Not that they're not each individually whole in themselves, but now there's a new thing that's created that only exists because of their relationship. And there's just something that's very sexy about that. There's something that's just really, really touching about that too, because they were both sort of made this way by El Balde, and that's the reveal that Lena, provides us too. And go ahead.
I just said spoiler alert.
Well, that episode is already shown.
Yeah, right there.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, there's so you know, I think there's something that sort of absolute freedom of being able to tell a story without looking towards, you know, checking out boxes or particular agendas. Just like let's just explore all of our loves and all of our you know, the things that inspire us, things we have affinities for, you know, from Mexican cinema to you know, mythology and all these other things, and how they blend into this one space. And that's how all of these things came to be. It's just from opening ourselves to that.
Yeah, Garcia actually being a female police officer came about organically too. That was entirely because we were doing a bunch of research on that period, so we could draw things from real history in that space, and found out that right around the time period that the show had been placed in, that women had at that moment begun to achieve civil rights in Mexico, and specifically be allowed to become police officers for the first time. And so it was just like, what an interesting story to explore that fits so well within the context of the world that we're building. You know,
all the initial decks that we pitched up until we got into actually writing the real show, you know, Garcia was a dude. And just, it's so hard to even imagine that as a thing now. But yeah, he was another guy with a mustache, and the relationship with Bristol was completely different. And it was just one of those revelations that totally changed exactly what the show ended up becoming.
Well, I'm gonna respectfully disagree in that idea did not come about organically. That idea actually came from one of the executives at Netflix.
Oh, cool.
Oh, did it really?
Yeah, remember? Yeah.
No, that was my idea.
No,
Netflix.
that was Taiki's idea. Taiki said, we need more, you need to have another woman character in this show. You should think about this. And that's where the Garcia becoming Officer Garcia, the woman, came from. And it just like, it made so much sense in the room at the time. It's like, of course it should be a female cop. That's, yeah.
I feel like when Brad Woods first called me, I was like, this is one of the 3 things I think you should do. Because I had done all that reading on Wikipedia about that time period. All right, I'm going to share it. I'll share it with Taiki.
We'll chalk that up to collective unconscious, yeah.
No, that's great. So all the things that you guys just talked about are just some of the many, many reasons that folks should be checking out Seis Manos for, I mean, beyond the incredible action and the original mythology and just like the fun of the series itself. But because I'm about out of time with you guys, I wanted to give you a chance, while we wait to hear more on Seis Manos Season 2, what else are you all currently up to, either at Powerhouse or kind of in your own creative path?
I'll go first because it's easy for us. So we're working on He-Man and the Masters of the Universe for our friends at Netflix and Mattel, which is going along extremely well, and we're super excited about. We're working on Heaven's Forest, which is another show with Warren Ellis and Kevin Colby, and also for Netflix. And then, season 3 of Castlevania came out fairly recently, and we're working on more stuff for that as well. So, like, at the end of the day, it's everybody's still pushing. We've got 3 or 4 shows in development. There's another show called Blood of Zeus, Gods and Heroes, which is based on Greek mythology. So that one's in post right now, and things are firing on all cylinders.
Very cool.
What am I doing right now? I'm finishing up running the 2nd season of an adult animated sci-fi action genre show for HBO Max that I cannot name specifically.
Interesting.
Yeah, but it's the 2nd season, so the 1st season's already out, and the show is wonderful.
It's Toucan Birdie.
Right.
Absolutely. It takes a really hard left turn into serious sci-fi action. Season. What else? A variety of other development projects that are all having fun in Lawyerland, and things are wonderful. It's a blast to be able to write wearing Uggs in my house, and look forward to that show that I can't name when it comes out, and all the wonderful Powerhouse.
I've been after Seis Manos. I went to New York to work on a Showtime series that we were about to start shooting when everything shut down, called Rust with Jeff Daniels attached to star. I'm hoping that we will get back to that once the fog lifts. In the meantime, I'm trying to work on a couple of other projects with some international television companies to develop a TV series. One could be a limited series, one might be an ongoing series. So that's what I've been doing, but I've been kind of more in the live action space. But always looking for opportunities to get back into the animation space, particularly with these guys.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I should say that. I can't get too specific, but there is another original that we all built that we're trying to figure out, getting out there as well. That is very exciting and spooky, and I can say nothing more about it.
Well, that's a perfect tease to end the conversation on. So thank you guys again so much for your time today. Thank you even more for Seis Manos. I can't wait for folks out there to either see it for the first time or catch up with you guys during Saturday's watch parties. And hopefully we hear a season 2 renewal soon. So fingers crossed. Thank you guys so much again and have a great day.
Thank you. Take care.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Bye.